Yeah, boy, it's Uncle Buckets here, and we're about to check another one off the old bucket list. Today, we're going to take the idea of putting backsplash like we did on this side of the kitchen, and we're going to bring it around onto the short wall on this side of the kitchen. So the first thing we need to do is take off those face plates, and then we'll get to work. Okay, it's time to show you some of the tools we're going to need in order to do the job. So I'll come around to the front of the camera here. Don't mind the coveralls. I laughed at my father-in-law when he wore coveralls, and now I can't get enough of them. They keep me kind of clean, and at the same time, I can put all my tools in them. So they look a little old school, but they work. So the first thing you're going to need for the job is you're going to need the tile. So the tile we're using are these small bricks here. They come on a backing of mesh. So if you were going to do a large job, you could just put the big chunks of almost like a big tile, like a 12 by 12 tile, and put them on along your wall. So it's kind of like what we did on the other side of the kitchen that I showed you previously. One of the nice things about having it set there is you can do large jobs quickly, but we can also cut the mesh backing and have smaller sections that we can cut. And in fact, we can even just take individual pieces right off and then use that tile. So in this particular situation, we are going to be using two tiles like this, and I might have to make a small cut here along the bottom as well so that I can fill in that bottom. But when we put that in, we're also going to have to use a spacer. That spacer is going to give us enough room here so that we can put a caulking line along the bottom. We're going to use a screwdriver. Screwdriver is important because I just use that to clear away some of the thin set that's in here after I put it up. You're going to need a tape. Later on, we're going to use the grouting applicator here. However, I do use this today too to help me apply pressure onto the tiles as I put them onto the wall into the thin set. Painter's tape. I use the painter's tape to tape along the top edge of our countertop. That way, we don't get any thin set on the countertop. That way too, we also put cardboard down in order to keep some things clean. Here you need a sponge. That's going to help you to clean things up as you go along. Now, I don't use a big bucket full of the mortar. I have only done this job one time before, so I'm showing you a couple of little tricks that I've used along the way. I use this little contraption here is for drywalling. So you put your drywall mud in here and then you apply your drywall. It's got a nice little sharp edge along the top to allow to keep things clean. I like to use that with my trowel because for me, I can work in small little batches in small little areas. It might take a little bit longer for me to do, but when you're not very practiced at this like I am, this was a nice little tool for me. I've got my trowel here, and this is a square notch trowel. So after watching a few videos online, I found that this is the one that I wanted to use for this application. And if I look at it, it's a 1/4 inch square trowel. And that's going to allow us to apply the thin set onto the wall. I've got a putty knife here. I use this knife to help me do the mixing. So I put my mortar, my thin set into the box here, and then I just use this to mix things up. I continually add water to make sure it's the right consistency, so I got a little bucket for that. And I've got my thin set. So my thin set here is just an accelerated thin set. It's just from the local hardware store, and I just use it in small little batches. This was enough for me to do that whole other wall, plus it'll be more than enough to do this. This is probably enough to do twice the other wall that I had. And then the last thing that I use is just an industrial bucket. And the reason why I use that is I throw my tools in there when I'm not using them. That helps to keep them from the cement, from the thin set from drying on it, while at the same time, every time I put this back into my box with the thin set in it, it adds just a little bit of water to help me keep that proper consistency. I've got a tape here. I've also got a magic marker, a Sharpie here, And I'm using a red one because the red one really stands out on the tile when we mark the tile, and it shows up very well across the back of the mesh here as well. So when we're using the wet tile saw, which I'll show you later, that's another important tool. You can see things really well with this red marker. And that's about all the tools that I have for you. So we're just going to get things ready, and I'll show you how we mix up the mortar. Okay, so we're just going to set up our thin set now. There's no real rhyme or reason to this from what I found anyways. I'm sure the expert tilers have a rhyme or reason. I just find that we want it to be about the consistency of peanut butter, and I don't want too much at any one time in order for me to be able to work slowly and not have to worry about it drying up on me. So I just apply the powder in here, and it's just kind of like a sand, a really fine sand. I'll put some water in here. You're going to want to just put little bits of water at a time. It's easier to add a little bit more water than it is to have to add more sand after. So we're just going to mix this up. Takes a little bit to mix up. Gets a little bit chunky in there. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, so it starts to thicken up. We're going to need a little more water. Again, just adding small amounts of water at a time. Really making this video for my brother-in-law. He was asking the other day, we're home on quarantine with the COVID-19, and we were FaceTiming, well, on a house party. Anyways, they were asking me about how I did the backsplash, and I just tackled it by watching a few YouTube videos, so I thought, well, why don't I just make a YouTube video myself? So this is still a little bit too thick. We're going to add just a little bit more water here. Again, small amounts at a time. Yeah, they'll show you in the videos to have the big mixer and the big bucket and make them in bigger batches, but I tried that and I ended up throwing out a whole big block of cement because I was too slow, because I was too new at all this. So I had to do it myself, and I figured doing it in smaller batches and using this, even though it's for drywalling, seemed to be a pretty good fit for me. So we're almost there. I'm just going to add a touch more water. Get that kind of nice and thick here. Again, hopefully you can see it. You can see the consistency there. It's kind of like a thick peanut butter. That's looking pretty good. So I'm just going to scrape off my knife. Make sure I kind of have everything down in the box. I'm going to put my knife back in my bucket of water for next time. And get my trowel out of my bucket of water. And then you see this is actually a good little contraption for getting our mix on. And I like that we have the knives on the edge here too, so I can use it to clean. All right, so first thing we're going to do here is we're going to apply this first brick. So like I said, we're doing it as a bordering brick. So we're going to have to put it up and down here. So I want to make sure that I don't have any of this mesh sticking out the outside of it. I can always trim it off later. But what I'm going to need to do is measure this off for our first cut. So again, I'm going to want to use my spacers to make sure that I have enough space along the bottom to apply that bit of caulking. So I've got a spacer here, and I've got my tile there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this around, make sure it's across the top, the level with the edge. I'm going to use my red marker, and I'm going to measure it so I have my cut there. I'm a little bit high because I'm trying to do it for the camera. So I'm just going to do the inside edge of that particular cut. You can see the red shows up really well. And I'm going to head out to the towel saw and show you how we use the wet towel saw. That's our next plan of attack. Okay, so now we're going to use the wet towel saw. A couple things here. I used this towel saw before and I, of course, lost a couple of parts. One thing that's important is that you need to have water. So I use this painter's tray. It actually works really well because when we slide that underneath the blade, it's going to like continually provide it with water because it's got a little extra up top. So I don't have to keep changing it. I put a new diamond blade on. You have to look at the manufacturer and figure out how that all works. Okay. And then I just use the straight edge here with some clamps so that when I'm doing the longer cuts, this one's a short cut, it's not too hard. I'm just going to slide it across the deal and away we go. So we've got water running to keep the blade dry, or keep the blade wet, and to keep it wet while we're doing this cut. We got our cut. I got a little nick there, so I'm going to have to try this one again. You don't want that little nick because then when we're trying to do the grouting, so we're going to try this one again. Like I said, we're going to learn along with. So I got a nice straight line on here again. We'll try another cut. Just nice, even, soft pressure when doing it on the blade here. And let the blade do the work. So I got a little hunk there. I'm just going to shave that off just a little bit. There we go. We got ourselves a nice straight edge. Okay, so we've made our straight cut. You can see the little bit of the red line there. I cut just on the inside of that line so that we could have that nice straight cut. Now our tiles are ready to roll. I'm going to get my trowel out of my water because I put it in there in between. I added just a touch more water to my thin set because it was just starting to tighten up a little bit. So let's give it another little mix. And we'll get it all back to that consistency I want. So now we're going to be cruising. So I got the consistency that I'm looking for. Put that back in the water. I'm going to grab my trowel. Now we're going to do some nice lines along the wall. We got a little bit of time before it sets, but I like to just do one set of tiles at a time because that way it's not going to dry up on me. And again, I'm just using a small batch here. So I'm going to grab me some thin set. I'm going to just drop it on the wall like this. Make sure I get it right up to the tile. Get enough that I know I'm going to be able to put that full tile on. And I don't put on much more than that. I can just scrape it off after if there's more. And then I want to just apply, I'm at a 45-degree angle here, and I want to just apply the edge of the trowel like that so I have those nice ridges. Grab my tile. Place it in place here. Again, this stuff just kind of cleans up. Want to make sure that it's going to be level with the top of my wall, while at the same time leaving about the same gap here as the rest of the grout lines. I learned that pretty quick last time, that you can get those grout lines a little bit too large. Okay, so it sits there a little bit. going to grab my grout applicator. I like to use this. Got a lot of water on it. I like to use this to apply pressure onto my tiles. And while I'm applying pressure, I can just kind of slide a little bit here. And I want to make sure that it's going to stay along that top edge. This first one's pretty important. Slide just a little bit. Because this first one is pretty important for setting the rest of our tile. Making sure that first grout line is going to be matching. I'm just going to hold it for a couple of seconds here while we're waiting for it just to set slightly. So it won't slide down on me. I'll be able to jimmy it around a little bit for the next little few minutes here, just as that cement sets. Got a nice straight line up top. We're a little bit big on that first grout line. I'm just going to slide it over a little bit. Make sure we're nice and straight. Okay, then I'm going to grab that screwdriver I was talking about and just make sure I've got these holes, these lines nice and cleaned out, because we're going to need those later for grouting. And we're going to want those to be open so that our grout can sit in there. And there's our first brick. Now, we're going to be able to clean this up afterwards. I'm going to wait just a little bit and take that sponge and clean some of that excess off. And we're going to get ready for the next ones. So, for the next ones, again, we're just going to need two. We've got our pattern already established, so I don't need to make any cuts. Just going to cut off two more. Come in, apply some more of our thin set. Again, making sure that it's going to be far enough to cover that whole that next set of tiles we're going to put down. If we put a little bit too much, that's okay. We can just scrape it off on the end if we're worried it's going to dry up. First little bit just kind of goes on thick, and then we get those nice lines after. So we just want to make sure we have good coverage in here. So you can see this little box that I use is pretty handy because I can just keep it up here with me while I'm applying small amounts. If I was better at this, I'm sure it'd be a lot easier for me to just reach it out of a big pail and go. But I'm not all that practiced at it, but I can show you it's not all that hard to do. 45-degree angle. Get those nice lines on there. And then we're ready for our next set of tiles. So now we've already established this pattern. So we're just going to place the next one on. Again, a couple things we want to make sure of. One, that we're level across the top. And two, our grout lines here are going to match the rest of the bricks, rest of the tiles. Squish that in there. It's okay if we get a little extra of the mortar coming through. Take our float, apply some good pressure, make sure it's in. You see my grout line's a little bit too big here because we can see it's sagged. So we just need to make sure we bring that back up. And push that back over so we can get that good grout line. Applying that pressure to keep it nice and tight. Making sure that grout line is accurate and even. Our other one sagged here a little bit, so I still have some room to play, some time to play. It takes a little bit of time for that thin set in behind to harden up fully. Make sure I've got everything lined up. Our grout lines look pretty good. We got a little bit of gunk in there, and we'll peel that out of there. And like I said, use your screwdriver. Take that out of there so that we can get the grout in next time. And there we're starting. I'm just going to grab my sponge, wring it out pretty good. It's just damp. I'm just going to take some of this cement off here too, this thin set, and clean up some of these lines. Flipping it over, make sure it's clean. This will help us down the road when we're getting ready to grout tomorrow or the next day. You see it comes off pretty good, even off that first tile. Making sure everything's set where we want it to be. Make sure everything's just tight across that top. Nice and level. Our lines are pretty good. Top edge is doing pretty good. Applying pressure to get that good tight fit. There we go, those are first two rows. So what we're going to do next is I'm just going to put it on time lapse. We're going to do a little bit up until we get to the outlet there, and then we'll show you how we're going to do some cuts around that outlet. I'm just going to scrape off some of this extra thin set while I get stuff ready for the next one, so you can just clean it up. Not a problem. I get worried sometimes because I work slow. And because I work slow, I don't want that to set. And I'm coming back to do this bottom line later. And you see the need for that painter's tape there too. I even have some on the counter here a little bit. I should maybe put another row of painter's tape there. So there we go. We've got our pattern set up. We have our outline here, which is our border here. And we're just going to run that down the line, and we're going to make some cuts around the electrical box. Okay, one thing we're going to watch here, I applied another layer of painter's tape down, and I got myself some paper towel because that's helpful too. The next thing we want to do is we're taking a look at this electrical outlet. We want to be able to apply around it. So I'm just trying to do some planning here for what the cuts are going to look like. And right now it's pretty darn close. I want to make sure that this tile can get underneath this part of the electrical outlet. That's going to help us down the road there too. So I'm just going to slide that under, see if I can make any kind of cut. And I think I'm going to have to cut just a little bit off of that so I can make that fit. So that's that bottom piece there that I'm going to have to cut. So I'll make sure I get out my red marker. And make sure I got a nice square line here. And I'm just going to cut off a little bit. I'd rather cut off a little bit at a time. And just make sure she's going to work. In fact, I think what I'm going to do to make this even easier for myself is I'm going to take this one piece off of the backing. So I'm going to take out my knife, take it off the mesh here so it sits by itself so I can make that cut by itself. So, give her a cut. I'm going to need just that little bit underneath there to be cut. I'm going to make a little cut and then I'm going to come back and see how we're going to do. In the meantime, I'm just over here, just checking, making sure that none of this has dropped too much. None of it's changed and sagged. You don't want to forget about it and have it set later and us not have that nice straight edge across the top. So I'm going to go in and make a cut and we're going to see how this goes from here. Okay, so we're at another tricky spot here, trying to work the other side of the outlet. What's tricky about it is we want to make sure we are maintaining the same pattern. So if we slide this brick on here like so, we want it to be this tile, it to be here, meaning we're going to have to cut off part of this tile here. So just thinking about that as we work around this edge of the tile, we want the pattern to stay the same, meaning we're going to have to cut this off here. So it's going to be a little bit past where this is going to be. We want it to slide into here. So we're going to have to make that cut in order to get it into place so we can maintain our pattern. Just making sure that everything's staying up to the top here while it's drying. Keeping things clean for later. Help us down the road. So we're going to have to make that cut to go around there. We'll time lapse and keep on trucking. Okay, so this is a tricky part now around the outlet. We want to make sure that we're maintaining level across the top, like I was mentioning before. So just checking those. But also we want to make sure that coming around this outlet, we're maintaining this pattern. So in order to maintain the pattern, we want the next brick to come like this. So we're going to have a small brick to go in here and a small brick to go in here so we can maintain this pattern around the outlet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this one down, put the next one down, and the next time we stop, we're going to do the outside border there and talk about these two cuts here. So I'm going to time lapse again and show you what that looks like. Okay, so this part's going to be a little bit tricky. I'm going to use some of my scrap pieces from my cuts from before to fill in these little holes here. So I maintain the subway tile pattern here. I've set my border, my edge tile here. So now I'm going to drop in the rest of my tiles. I'm going to need to make sure that I maintain the pattern. And I'm going to have one little spot left here so I have the straight cut and the pattern coming through. After that, I'm going to make some long skinny cuts in individual tiles. I'm going to take them off with a mesh back. I'm going to do the individual tiles, cut them long and skinny so that they match along here, making sure that I have my spacers in so that I can fill that caulk line, and we'll show you what that end finished product looks like. So I had to make some funky cuts just around the outlet there, and then just at the very end, like you can see, I didn't do some great planning. Oh, while I'm not an expert at this, I think once it's grouted up, you're going to see that the area down over here on the far corner is going to turn out all right once the grout's there. So that's the first two lines, subway tile around the outlets. And really the whole thing, including me trying to do some filming here, just took me 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours. It wasn't all that bad, and that includes me getting the filming in. So next up is just to do the lines underneath. So I got to do that thin little line underneath, matching the subway tile as we go along. And then we'll leave it overnight and we'll grout it tomorrow.